Grace barely had time to react before rough hands grabbed her arm. The man's breath was hot and foul as he growled, "Give me the money, now." Her heart pounded. She was at an ATM, in broad daylight. This wasn't supposed to happen. She tried to step back, but his grip tightened. A chilling fear paralyzed her until a deep, thunderous growl filled the air. Before Grace could process what was happening, Max lunged. The large German shepherd clamped onto the mugger's arm with unshakable force, his teeth sinking deep. The man howled in agony, desperately trying to kick Max away, but the dog held firm. Panic overtook him as he screamed, "Help! Get this dog off me!" Grace stood frozen. Her mind screamed at her tact, but the shock of the attack and the sheer speed of Max's reaction left her momentarily paralyzed. She hadn't even commanded him. He just knew. People turned, a small crowd formed. Phones were out, capturing the moment. Someone called for help. Yet, even as the mug arrived, Grace hesitated. She knew Max had been trained for this, but he was no longer a police officer. He was her dog now. "Max, let go." She finally found her voice, firm but calm. The command worked instantly. Max released his grip but remained alert, his body tense, his deep brown eyes locked onto the attacker, ready to strike again if needed. The mugger clutched his injured arm and took off down the street, disappearing into the crowd. Grace exhaled, shaking as she grabbed her phone. Her hands trembled as she dialed 911. Max, ever watchful, stayed close, his stance protective. Within minutes, sirens blared in the distance. Officer Daniels arrived first. He crouched to pet Max, a grin forming on his lips. "Well, look who hasn't forgotten his training," he said, scratching the dog behind his ears. Max allowed the touch, something unthinkable 9 months ago. 9 months. That's how long it had been since Max came into her life. A retired K9, haunted by loss. Grace never planned to take him in. She had refused at first. Having worked as a veterinarian, she knew how much emotional baggage retired police dogs carried. But her younger brother Pete, now training with the FBI, had pleaded with her. "He only listens to you," he had said. Max had been a decorated police dog, working alongside Pete's partner, Greg. The two were inseparable until Greg was killed in a shootout. The trauma broke Max. He became unmanageable. No officer could handle him. But for some reason, he tolerated Pete. And when Pete left for Quantico, the only option was Grace. At first, Max was withdrawn, a shadow of the fearless officer he once was. But over time, they built a routine: morning runs, long walks, quiet evenings, watching TV. He wasn't just a dog anymore. He was family. Now, as the officers gathered around, watching Max, Grace could see the admiration in their eyes. Someone might be ready to rejoin the force, Daniels joked, but the words sent a jolt through her. Was this temporary? Had she only been keeping Max until they deemed him fit to return? A pang of fear settled in her stomach. She didn't want to lose him. Not now. Not ever. But she pushed the thought aside. That was a problem for another day. That night, Grace couldn't shake a feeling of unease. Something about the mugger's attack felt off. Why had Max been so aggressive? It was as if he recognized the man. Hours later, her phone rang. It was Officer Daniels. "We identified your attacker," he said. "His name's Tom Rogers. Low-level criminal. Drug addiction issues. But here's the thing, he's been erratic lately, doing things that don't make sense." Grace frowned. "Like what?" "He's been seen at an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. It's known for illegal activity. We think someone higher up is pulling his strings." Grace's pulse quickened. She had just been a random target, right? "We could use your help," Daniels continued. Max's skills could be invaluable. The idea of bringing Max into an active investigation sent chills down her spine. But she thought about what could have happened if she had been alone at that ATM. She owed it to others who might not be so lucky. Okay, she agreed. We're in. The next night, under the cover of darkness, they arrived at the warehouse. The structure loomed in the moonlight, its crumbling walls casting eerie shadows. Max moved ahead, nose to the ground, then stopped, ears pricked, body stiff. Inside, voices murmured, metal clinked, weapons, money. Danielle signaled the team. The officers stormed in, chaos erupted. Some criminals ran, others fought. Max sprang into action, expertly taking down one of the men, his training sharper than ever. Then Max froze, his entire body stiffened. A low, guttural growl rumbled in his chest. Before Grace could react, he lunged, teeth bared. A man screamed as Max knocked him to the ground, paws pinning him. He clawed at Max, but the dog refused to let go. Then, Danielle's voice cut through the noise. "Oh my God, that's Machete." Grace's breath caught. The man responsible for Greg's death, the one the police had hunted for years. Max had recognized him. He never forgot. Tears welled in Grace's eyes as she watched Max return to her side, his eyes searching hers. Would she push him away for what he had just done? Instead, she knelt, wrapping her arms around him. "You did good, Max. You did so good." Back at the station, Tom Rogers confessed everything. He had been working under Victor Martinez, a local crime lord. But it was Machete who had killed Greg. With the evidence collected, the police dismantled the operation. Justice was finally served. A few weeks later, the department honored Max and Grace for their bravery, but the best moment came when Pete called. "The department wanted Max back," he said, "but I told them they'd have to fight you for him." Grace laughed, relief washing over her. Max wasn't just a former K9 anymore. He wasn't even just her pet. He was home.